rest, recuperation, and a little bit of rumors. I'm Josh, and you're in the second seat. Welcome back, everyone. It is the end of the summer break. We are leading in to Zandvoort with race week this week, and it's great to be back in the chair. Thank you so much for your patience over this time. I apologize for my inconsistency and a little bit of laziness, but it was a massive first half of the year for me, particularly getting the podcast up and running, getting the Instagram side of things up and running as well, and getting used to balancing the production and development and planning and all that sort of stuff of this side of thing on my own. So yeah, it was great to enjoy my own little version of the summer break, even though here in Australia it's definitely winter. But as you can see, I'm still in a t-shirt. That's because I'm in sunny Queensland and it's beautiful weather here most of the year round. So yeah, but as I said, summer break is over. It's race week. I want to get back into the swing of things. So first and foremost, we heard very little in the way of rumors over the summer break, but there were a couple of persistent discussions that occurred, most notably, in my mind, surrounding our very own Oscar Piastri and a potential swap with Max Verstappen. A couple of things came out during the last few weeks in that space. Nothing in terms of the swap going ahead, but, little bits of intrigue, I suppose, is the way to put it. So the backstory so far is obviously that Max is unhappy with the state of the car at Red Bull, is looking to move on. The backstory with Oscar, obviously the challenges from 2025, perception of bias papaya rules towards Lando and a few other bits and pieces. So that's sort of really where it started. Zach Brown had a really good interview with Will Buxton just before the summer break. He was adamant at that point in time that he was keeping Lando and Oscar. Their names were signed onto their seats for next year. And personally, I take that pretty strongly. I don't like to buy into the rumors side of things. So as far as I see it, I'm taking that on face value. There's been a couple of things where they've come out and said, not just Zach, but Andrea, and then obviously Oscar's manager, Mark Webber, highlighting that he is staying at McLaren and isn't looking to move on himself either. On the Mark Webber side of things, there was some uproar or, sort of flamboyant discussion on the state of him and Oscar's relationship or potential fallout with McLaren even further. Someone, started this point saying that he's unfollowed McLaren, deleted a whole host of imagery of him and Oscar. I think people are looking too much into that. If there is any truth to it, there's been discussions that he never followed McLaren in the first place from a social media perspective, but I don't understand why he would delete all of these images of him and Oscar together, but yet still be following Oscar. And if there was any truth to the rumor around Max and Oscar swapping, he's still following Max as well. So, yeah, I think for me, that discussion, that rumor is largely ridiculous. I can't see it happening. Max has a huge amount of sway and influence and flexibility at Red Bull that I don't think he would get anywhere else. He has the ability to go and participate in other racing series as he wants to his own desire, and then comes back and jumps into the F1 side of things, where, again, he has a lot of influence in the design and development of the car as well. His word is almost gospel in that place, and it doesn't make sense to me from a rational perspective for him to leave to go to somewhere like McLaren, where he's going to be treated on equal pegging or level pegging with another world champion in Lando Norris, who has a stronger and deeper bond with the wider McLaren family, Zach Brown in particular, and going from there. So I think for me, that rumor is null and void. It doesn't make sense to me. So I think we put that to bed for now. The other rumor that flared up a little bit during the summer break, and that was only due to recent posts or confirmation rather, is the Liam Lawson and Nicola Solov swap change out rather, that could be occurring at the end of this year. And that's purely because Solov has been confirmed to be doing some testing in VCarb's car from 2025 later this year. Now, as far as I see it, it makes sense for VCarb to be, giving one of their up-and-coming drivers the opportunity to do some testing in an F1 car. It doesn't mean that they're going to be swapping the two drivers out. Liam has driven exceptionally well this year. He's put all of the drama from 2025 behind him. He's consistently in the points. He's consistently ahead of his teammate Arvid Lindblad. And if you compare the level of experience, between Liam and obviously Solov, Liam's had a number of years in Formula One now, obviously starting in 2024, and coincidentally, the race that's about to eventuate in Zandvoort being that first opportunity for him with Daniel Ricciardo's injury, but more on that a little bit later. So, for mine, Liam's progress and development this year has shown that he doesn't deserve to lose his seat. They've come out from a VCarb leadership side and said that, his seat is safe for now. Red Bull's system, I'm a little bit more wary of rather than McLaren in the discussion with Piastri there. So for me, there might be a little bit more to the Lawson and Solov drama than meets the eye, but I think Liam deserves to retain his seat at least for next year and seeing how that goes. But if I'm Liam Lawson, I probably would have a little bit of nerves there leading into the second half of the season. Another interesting one that's come up a couple of times is Carlos Sainz going to Audi potentially. Now, he was looking at Audi as an option prior to signing to Williams when he left Ferrari at the back end of 2024. So that obviously didn't eventuate. He saw the potential of the project with Williams and wanted to buy into that long term. Obviously, that's not going the way certainly he, but obviously James Vowles and the rest of the Williams team have expected. They've been really struggling this year with the weight of the car in particular, but also just the overall chassis and the aerodynamic side. They're running a Mercedes power unit, so there's a little bit of reliability issues there, but largely that's not so much of a problem with them. It's the rest of the car in and of itself. But in terms of Carlos going to Audi, whilst it might be a good fit for him longer term, Audi have got Gabby Bortoleto long term, and Nico Hulkenberg has actually been driving really well this year. It's, again, reliability issues on the Audi side that it has prevented him from getting into the points. And largely, we saw the potential of the R26 car at Hungary prior to the summer break. So, I think my observations is that Nico Hulkenberg will be with Audi next year. I think he will want to retire on his own terms rather than being pushed out the door. But I can't see Audi getting rid of Nico anytime soon. And there's not really anywhere else for Carlos to go. So again, I don't see much in it. I think it's people just talking for the sake of generating drama, which frustrates me. One that I do see a fair bit of truth in is either Leo Fornaroli or Rafael Camara, who's currently in the F2. Both development drivers, Leo for McLaren and Rafael for Ferrari, got one of them taking up a seat at Haas. Now, Esteban Ocon, there was rumors earlier in the year that he had fallout with the Haas team principal, AU. Who knows whether or not that's true. But Esteban has struggled for pace this year. He's struggled to keep up with Ollie Behrman, who's only in his second season, and then is also a Ferrari linked driver who, has openly said that he'd like to get into the red of the Tifosi at some point in his career, and is obviously waiting for Lewis Hamilton to move on. I think is the most likely out of he and Charles Leclerc. But for Leo or Rafael, I think it'll come down to Leo having been the champion for F2, getting in that space first and foremost. McLaren will want to keep him in their system for if and when something happens for Lando and Oscar. And Leo as an F2 champion deserves a crack at F1. We know that doesn't always eventuate because there's only 22 seats. So who knows? But there's also the potential option of Cadillac moving on at least one of their drivers. The likely of those two would be Valtteri Bottas, who's struggled with, again, reliability issues this year, but I think out of he and Checo's definitely performed the most consistently of those two. So in my mind, it would make sense that Valtteri would be the one to move on. Yes, Cadillac have got Colton Herta there, but I don't think he's shown enough in the Formula 2 space to suggest that he can make the step to Formula 1 in a successful manner, particularly down the track when Cadillac, certainly I think next year, will be looking to fight for points rather than, finishing anywhere between 12th to 22nd. So Esteban, I definitely think will probably move on at the end of this year. If not the end of this year, definitely next year, unless he picks up significantly. But that's the only movement I really see happening in the field. Everything else I think will stay pretty set for 2027, but we'll come back to this at the end of the year and see if I'm right. But that leads me as a good segue into my bold predictions for the rest of the season. You may have heard me speak previously about Mercedes being analogous this season to Brawn GP, with it being a brand new set of regulations. Mercedes have come out of the blocks firing, but slowly their advantage has been whittled away over the course of the season, which is something I spoke about and said would occur. We had 5 different Grand Prix winners over the last 5 races. Yes, 2 of those were Mercedes, but the rest were Ferrari and 1 McLaren. So for mine, I actually don't see Mercedes moving forward in a way for the rest of the season that they're going to win any more than 3 races. I think they'll podium a lot, but I don't see them being on the top step of the podium more than 3 times. On the other hand, and this could be a bit of bias because we're going into Zandvoort this weekend, but I see Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team coming back pretty hard, and Max getting to a point where the car is just competitive enough, similar to last season, where he'll be on a comeback for the rest of the year. So will it be a comeback for the ages and enough for him to take the championship? I don't think so. He's further back now at 110 points behind Kimi Antonelli versus 101 points behind Oscar Piastri at this point last year. So, and he only lost by 2 to Lando. So I think it might be a bit much to ask. And Laurent Mekies has actually come out and said that, it makes sense for them from a Red Bull perspective to actually start looking towards 2027 for their car now anyway. So I think they'll get it to a point where it's competitive enough for Max to podium regularly, then move into 2027 and have an absolute beast. But I think he'll make a comeback for the ages enough to finish top 3, I think, in the title fight. McLaren, really good finish at Hungary there. Both Lando and Oscar looked pretty good. Oscar struggled, I think, a lot with the new package, mainly because he didn't get a lot of time with it. He had basically less than a full session with that new upgrade package before the Grand Prix in and of itself. Just didn't seem to feel comfortable with it during the Grand Prix, and then obviously had issues with the gearbox, but was still driving well enough to, certainly from a defensive perspective, to hold Lando out, despite Lando being the quicker car. So if that progress is anything to go by, I think McLaren, who have shown in the past that their development across a season is impeccable, almost second to none. I can see them winning at least 3 races over the course of the rest of the season, and at least one of those obviously will be for Oscar. Places like Azerbaijan, Vegas as well, potentially Singapore, will all feed into what I think will suit the MCL 40, and go from there. So will it be enough for the likes of Lando to come back and take back-to-back drivers' titles? I don't think so. I still think the drivers' title is between Kimi, George, and Lewis, and go from there. But the Lewis side of things leads me into my final bold prediction for the year, which is that Ferrari will come back and win the Constructors. I think their development has been enough to keep them in the fight, and they've been in the points consistently. Lewis Hamilton is the only driver this year to score points in every single race. I think for mine, that coupled with the reliability issues that Mercedes have had is enough for me to put, a little bit of hopium, whatever you want to go with, into the Ferrari Constructors side of things. So, but who knows? We'll see how things play out at Zandvoort this weekend. Personally, I'm really hopeful for Oscar. I think his lessons from last year will be in the back of his mind, and he'll come out firing in the second half of this season, kind of a reverse to 2025, where he really struggled in the second half of the year. So that said, we have Zandvoort this weekend, the last time that we're going to be at Zandvoort, at least for the near future. Who knows what will happen long term. Disappointing in my mind. I actually really like Zandvoort as a circuit. I think the location is incredible and makes it quite challenging for the drivers in terms of the weather is unpredictable, the wind is unpredictable because they're right on the ocean side there. Then they've got to deal with grip issues because of sand blowing in from the beach and all that sort of jazz. So it's, for mine, it's a technical track, but it's also a challenging track from a weather perspective, and that makes it exciting. So unfortunately, I think because it's privately run, they've not been able to secure the funding to go forth, and they're not being able to bring enough in from an economical perspective to keep the race going and afford the fees and whatnot that are associated with it through to F1 management and Liberty Media and those sorts of things. So yeah, unfortunately, the privateer side of house not working for the Dutch Grand Prix, unlike Silverstone, who is, I think, the only other privately run track on the F1 calendar. They obviously made a massive amount this year, but they also have a number of high-profile events that both occur there now and are occurring there in the future, with the World Endurance Championship going to Silverstone next year, and MotoGP and things like that as well. So they have a far bigger income stream, revenue stream than the likes of Zandvoort. So disappointing for mine. I understand where the Dutch government is coming from in terms of not wanting to add the funding to support it. Instead focusing those funds on grassroots development, not specifically for motorsport, but sports in general across the Netherlands. But we've got to enjoy it whilst it lasts, and we've only got one more weekend with Zandvoort on the calendar. So best of luck to the Dutch Army there this weekend. I hope you guys get out and enjoy it as much as possible. Leading into who I think is going to win, given the prediction of rain across all 3 days. So both, and including the sprint and Grand Prix races themselves. For mine, it's going to be a Max masterclass. He absolutely loves driving in the rain. We've seen it a number of times. Brazil 2024 is still a standout moment in my mind, going from P17 to P1. Even last year, going from P20 starting in the pit lane and still finishing on the podium at P2. So a wet Zandvoort, it's his home track. He knows it like the back of his hand. He drives better than any other racer on that grid in the wet. So if the car's competitive, Max is gonna put it there, and he will dominate this weekend. A little bit of hopium here, but looking back to 2025, Oscar drove brilliantly at Zandvoort. So for me, if he has done enough from a sim perspective and gotten used to some of the ways the MCL 40 handles with that lower downforce over the course of the summer break, and noting it's only 14 days, the rest he can, the remainder of that time frame, they're allowed to come back to work and do what they need to do. So that simulator time for him will have been important. And if he's gotten that under wraps, I can see Oscar coming out firing on a track that he enjoys and finishing P2. And then to round out the podiums, Kimi Antonelli, who's been on fire all year. And for me, it makes sense that he would continue that momentum with another podium at Zandvoort. So, lots to go through, lots to look forward to over the course of the rest of the season. I think the break has been good, certainly for myself, coming back and feeling far more refreshed. And those that have been following along, certainly on the social side of the house, I've been getting a bit more into the Oceaneer side of things, posting about who our junior drivers are and other bits and pieces, such as the Tasman series and things like that. So keep your eyes peeled in that space. If you're not following along already, it's at the Second Seed on Instagram, and then make sure you're following along both here from a Spotify perspective, but if you also listen via Amazon, Apple, or on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed via those means too. So as we head into Zandvoort, if you guys have got any questions, thoughts, etc., that you'd like us to explore, please send in some comments, send in your comments, send in your questions. We will definitely tackle them on the show and go from there. So hope you're all well. Let me know if you've got any more. Cheers.